The studio lights were bright. The world was watching. Fox News had never seen this kind of guest before. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, young, bold, sharp-eyed, sat quietly across from Sean Hannity. Millions were tuned in. Africa's rising voice was about to face one of America's loudest. Hannity smiled, but it was fake. His tone, cold, condescending. "So, Captain," he sneered, "how do you explain leading a nation with no democracy, no freedom of press, and no economy?" A quiet hush fell in the studio, but Traoré didn't blink. He leaned forward slowly, hands calm. "Is that your opinion?" he asked softly. "Or the opinion of the people who fund you?" A ripple passed through the control room. Hannity laughed nervously. He didn't expect that. But what came next silenced even the camera crew. From beneath the table, Traoré pulled out a thick red file folder. It was labeled FBI, Confidential, Trump Family Case 9437. Hannity's eyes widened. So did the world's. "What is this?" he asked, his voice cracking. Traoré whispered, "Truth." And suddenly, you could hear a pin drop. The game had just changed. The cameras kept rolling, but you could tell something had gone very wrong. Traoré opened the red folder slowly. No theatrics, just purpose. Page by page, he laid out documents across the table. Bank records, classified letters, internal memos, all stamped with FBI seals and marked top secret. "This," he said calmly, "is what your country didn't want the world to see." Hannity's face turned pale. He reached out to grab the file, but Traoré slid it away. "No," he said. "Let the people see." The first document showed foreign accounts linked to real estate deals in West Africa. Deals tied to the Trump family. It named companies, amounts, dates, and worst of all, fake charities used as cover. Hannity's hands shook. "This is fake. This is a setup." But the audience wasn't buying it. Social media exploded. FBI Trump file was trending in 11 countries within minutes. Producers tried to cut the feed, but it was too late. The internet had already copied the footage. Hannity stood, his voice rising. "This is a smear. I won't be part of this circus." Then, he stormed off stage. But Traoré didn't flinch. He looked straight into the camera. "I'm not here to destroy. I'm here to awaken." And millions leaned in closer. The moment Hannity disappeared off set, the energy shifted. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat alone under the studio lights. The crowd in the back was frozen. Producers whispering, technicians staring, the silence louder than thunder. But Traoré wasn't done. He held up one final document. "This," he said, voice steady, "is the letter a child in Burkina Faso wrote to the U.S. Embassy 5 years ago." The camera zoomed in. It was written in crayon. "Dear America," it read, "why do you take our gold and give us guns? Why do your people smile at us on TV but sell weapons that kill our brothers?" The world stopped. Traoré looked into the lens, not with anger but with grief. "You call us corrupt," he said softly. "But we are poor because your corporations make sure we stay that way." He paused. "I have no hatred for Trump or for Hannity. I only have love for my people. But love without truth is not love. It's surrender." Viewers across continents wept. Some had never heard Africa speak like this, with pain, pride, and purpose. And in that moment, Traoré became more than a soldier. He became a voice the world could no longer ignore. The internet was on fire. Clips of Traoré reading that crayon letter were everywhere. News anchors froze mid-sentence. African mothers cried watching from clay homes. Even Americans, ordinary ones, sat stunned in disbelief. Traoré's voice, his pain, wasn't just for Burkina Faso. It echoed for every forgotten child, every stolen dream. And then came the twist. As producers rushed to shut down the broadcast, Traoré pulled out a second envelope, marked DOJ Internal Memorandum, 2019. He looked at the camera again. "This memo," he said, "proves the Trump organization was briefed on the illegal resource contracts in West Africa and did nothing." He held up a page, a signed email from a U.S. oil lobbyist offering to bury the case in exchange for access to Burkina cobalt. And there it was, the signature of Eric Trump. In that moment, people stopped laughing. This wasn't politics. This was robbery, betrayal, dressed in suits and red ties. In a rural village in Burkina Faso, a little boy stared at a cracked screen, gripping a rusted shovel. His father had died in that same cobalt mine. And now the world was finally listening. The silence wasn't just from Hannity. It was from history itself. The little boy's name was Yakuba. And suddenly, his story was everywhere. Traoré had brought his letter not just to expose a crime, but to humanize a wound. Backstage, as the Fox News studio scrambled, producers whispered into earpieces, "Pull him off. This is dangerous. What if he's right?" But the cameras kept rolling. Traoré continued. "Yakuba was 7 when he wrote that letter," he said. He watched his brother die under a collapsed tunnel in a mine owned by a shell company based in Delaware. The documents supported it. The money trail led straight back to private donors and U.S. contractors. "No one came," Traoré said, eyes full of emotion. "No aid, no justice, only silence." He paused, voice cracking slightly. "I met him. He thought writing a letter to America would change everything." He looked down. It took 5 years for anyone to read it. The studio was breathless. One woman in the crowd began to cry, but Traoré wasn't finished. "America doesn't hate Africa," he said gently. "But some people in power do not care if we live or die, and those people must be named." And suddenly millions wanted names. While the world leaned in to hear Traoré's calm storm, Sean Hannity was losing his mind off camera. "I need legal," he shouted into his earpiece. "Cut the live feed." But it was too late. Viewers had doubled. Millions of eyes, hearts pounding. Phones buzzed. People cried. Even in D.C., senators were watching. Hannity's face appeared on a side camera. His hands trembled. His mouth twitched. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered. He had never been this scared. Not of war, not of liberals, but of a truth-teller from Africa with nothing to lose. Traoré continued as if Hannity wasn't even there. "Here's a receipt," he said, holding up a scanned document. $1.2 million, paid to a fake NGO, supposedly for education. It bought guns instead. The file was linked to a 2020 Trump campaign donor. Hannity burst back onto the set, flustered. "This is not journalism, this is a smear campaign." But Traoré didn't even look at him. He turned to the audience. "You don't have to believe me. Just ask, why is he shouting when I'm showing proof?" That was it. The studio exploded. Not with noise, but with a silence so loud, it felt like a revolution. The camera had turned to Hannity again, but he wasn't the same man. His tie was loose. Sweat gathered near his hairline. His voice had lost its power. What once was confidence now looked like panic hiding behind pride. He turned to the audience. "This is a foreign attack," he said. "He's trying to divide America." But no one clapped. No one smiled. Even Hannity's own cameraman kept his lens locked on Traoré. And then Traoré did something that silenced even Hannity's mouth. He took a small photo from his wallet. It showed a mother in torn clothing, kneeling beside a small grave made of red earth and sticks. "That's my aunt," Traoré said softly. "That's her son. He died in a mine owned by a Trump-affiliated company. He was 12. The room gasped. He never got a last birthday. No cake, no shoes, just a helmet and a pickaxe." Tears fell from a woman in the front row. Even the boom mic operator wiped his eyes. Traoré's voice broke slightly. We are not your enemies. We are your consequences. And for the first time ever, Hannity had no words. Across the ocean, in a dusty town outside Ouagadougou, the mother in that photo was watching on a neighbor's cracked television. She hadn't known Traoré still kept the picture. She dropped to her knees and wept. Her son's name was Malik. He had loved drawing birds. He used to hum while collecting scraps of metal. He didn't understand politics. He just wanted to buy rice for his siblings. He died after a tunnel collapsed. The mining company promised compensation. They never came back. Back in the studio, Traoré unfolded a document stamped with a U.S. Department of Commerce seal. This letter, he explained, shows a federal official advising a Trump donor to continue mining operations, even after child labor warnings were filed. He looked straight into the camera again. Who's the criminal? The child with dirty hands, or the millionaire with bloody contracts? Silence. Hannity stood frozen. Even Fox News staff began looking at each other, unsure what to do. Someone from the back whispered, "We can't stop this." And yet, no one dared interrupt. Because for once, it wasn't a news broadcast, it was a eulogy, and the world watched in shame. Just as the studio tried to regain control, a staffer whispered into Traoré's ear. "Sir, you have a message from the U.S. State Department." Traoré nodded, pulled out his phone, and read aloud. "We urge you to return the documents immediately. This footage will be investigated." He smiled softly without fear. Then calmly, he turned the phone to the camera, showing the message on screen, live. The audience gasped. Hannity looked like he might faint, but Traoré wasn't finished. He tapped the mic gently and said, "America doesn't scare me. Silence does." He picked up the FBI file once more and held it high. "I don't hate Trump. I don't hate America. But if your wealth comes from my people's graves, we are no longer silent." He looked around the studio. "Do you know what it feels like to watch a child dig his own grave so that someone else can drive a new car?" A producer's voice cracked into the earpiece. "Shut it down now. Cut the feed." But before they could, millions were already screen recording. The truth had escaped the cage. And for the first time, America couldn't mute Africa. Traoré looked up from the FBI folder and turned one more page. It was a printed email chain, time-stamped April 2020. The sender, a Trump Foundation executive. The subject, disposal options, mining labor issues in Burkina Faso. The recipient was a man who'd been killed in a car crash 2 weeks after the email was sent. His name was Dr. Amadou Kone, a Burkinabe activist who had warned the world for years about the illegal cobalt mines. "This email," Traoré said softly, "was the last communication before Amadou died. His car was hit by an unmarked black SUV. He paused, then added, "No investigation, no arrests, nothing." A low murmur filled the studio. Then Traoré pulled out one more item, a video of Amadou speaking into a shaky camera the night before he died. "If this message reaches you," Amadou had said, "I've probably been silenced. But please, don't let them erase our children for profit." The room froze. Even Sean Hannity's face softened. That wasn't politics anymore. It was a ghost returning to finish his mission. And through Traoré, the dead were speaking again. As the story deepened, people around the world stopped what they were doing to watch. Airports paused CNN. Schools rolled out TVs. Even soldiers on patrol leaned in with their radios. Traoré gently held up a new photo. It showed a little girl, no older than 8, wearing a torn red scarf and holding a rusty tin bowl. "This is Awa," he said. "She lived in a mining town called Hannity. She used to sell water to workers at the mine gates. One morning she didn't return home. Days later, her body was found behind the compound wall. No cameras, no justice, not even a name in the newspaper. The mine was owned by a U.S. shell company registered in Texas. Traoré's voice dropped. They called it a stray dog attack, but the medical report was hidden. I found it. He held it up, signed by a French volunteer doctor. She was beaten to death. Gasps echoed in the studio. Then Traoré said something that shattered the room. Her mother still leaves her food every night, hoping maybe she's just hiding. Even the toughest men in the audience wiped tears. This wasn't just about Trump. This was about the world's forgotten daughters. The control room was in chaos. A Fox News producer whispered, "This can't air. Legal will bury us." But the viewers weren't leaving. The live stream had crossed 48 million. And then, something even more unexpected happened. A former U.S. intelligence official, watching the broadcast from Virginia, tweeted, "I've seen those documents. I confirm their authenticity. Traoré is telling the truth." The tweet went viral in minutes. Suddenly, people weren't just crying. They were angry. Back in the studio, Hannity returned with a fake smile. "You've made your point, Captain. Can we now return to serious journalism?" But Traoré didn't respond. Instead, he played an intercepted voicemail, a top Trump campaign donor threatening an African journalist. "Stay quiet, or your family won't wake up." The studio lights felt hotter now, the air heavier. Truth was no longer a theory. It was here, and it was undeniable. For the first time in Fox News history, the studio audience stood up and clapped, not for America, not for politics, but for a young African soldier who refused to be silenced. And at that moment, Ibrahim Traoré was no longer just a guest. He was history in motion. Captain Traoré stood quietly, watching the audience absorb the weight of his words. But he wasn't finished. He turned to a map displayed behind him, a satellite image of southern Burkina Faso, marked with red dots. "These," he said, "are abandoned mine shafts. Over 200, most operated without proper safety, some without legal permission." He walked to the map, pointing at 3 marked with yellow. Children were buried here, not once, not twice, but over and over. Then he read a line from a 2021 confidential memo addressed to a U.S. mining firm. "Liability must be mitigated. Consider remote operations through ghost subsidiaries. The region is poor and unlikely to push back." The signature? A former White House advisor. Traoré's voice trembled, but he didn't cry. "I visited those graves," he said. "I met mothers still boiling dirty water, still waiting for answers." One elderly man in the studio began weeping. And then, a voice from the crowd, soft, cracked. "We never knew." Traoré nodded gently. "That's how power wins," he said, "not by killing us, but by keeping you from seeing us." And just like that, Africa was no longer far away. It was right there in the room. Sean Hannity had returned to the edge of the stage, trying to hold his ground, but something in him had cracked. His voice wobbled as he asked, "Are you saying the Trump family is personally responsible for every tragedy in Africa?" Traoré turned slowly. "I'm saying they profited from pain and never once looked back." Then he reached into his folder and pulled out a wrinkled envelope, yellowed with age. He unfolded a letter gently, like something sacred. This letter was written by a Burkinabe man named Issouf in 1994. He worked in the mines when Trump-backed contractors first came in. The letter had never been mailed. It had been found in a burned village, still folded inside the man's shirt when his body was discovered. Traoré began to read, "Dear America, you say we are free now, but I dig all day and eat once. My hands bleed for your lights. My children cough from the dust. Please tell me, how is this different from the old chains?" The words echoed across the studio like a prayer. Hannity's mouth opened, but no sound came. And that day, for the first time ever, He lowered his eyes. Outside the Fox studio, a crowd had gathered. News vans lined the street. Protesters and supporters shouted. Chants of "Traoré, Traoré" echoed across the block. Inside, the live viewer count hit 72 million. People weren't just watching anymore. They were feeling something they hadn't felt in years. Conviction. Traoré stood taller. "This is not just about Trump," he said. "It is about how the world sees Africa, as a resource, not a people." He placed a final photo on the desk. A little girl smiling with missing teeth, her face covered in coal dust. Her name was Adama. She never went to school. She died with her father's boots on her feet because he promised her a better life. He paused, but he was buried beside her. The room broke. Even Hannity sat down, silent. No arguments, no headlines could undo this moment. A producer whispered to Traoré, "We're about to cut the stream. Do you want to say a final word?" Traoré nodded. He looked straight into the camera and said, "We don't need sympathy. We need solidarity. We don't need apologies. We need justice." And millions leaned in, tears streaming. Because this was no longer a story, it was a reckoning. Just as the network prepared to cut the live feed, a voice came through Traoré's earpiece. It was the U.S. ambassador to Burkina Faso. She was watching live from her office, and she was crying. "Ibrahim," she said gently, "I had no idea. I thought these were just rumors. I didn't know it was this real." Traoré closed his eyes. "You knew enough," he replied. "You just didn't ask questions." There was silence. Then she whispered, "What do you want me to do?" Traoré looked directly into the camera. "I don't want money. I don't want pity. I want a seat at the table. I want my people to stop dying for batteries and being buried in silence." The ambassador's voice broke. "I will speak," she said. "I promise." For the first time, an American official publicly supported Traoré's revelations. And just like that, this wasn't a broadcast anymore. It was a turning point in history. Outside, crowds in Ouagadougou cheered as his name echoed in chants from Kenya to Brazil. Traoré had done something no leader had dared before. He told the truth on the world's biggest stage, and the world listened. Sean Hannity sat alone in a corner of the studio. He no longer looked like a host. He looked like a man who had seen too much. "I didn't know it would go this far," he muttered. "I thought it was just another story." Traoré didn't answer. He simply walked toward him, calm. "You're not the enemy, Sean," he said. "But your silence helped build this." Hannity looked up, eyes red. "What would you do if it were your children?" Traoré didn't hesitate. "I would burn the contract. I would tear down the mine. I would never choose profit over life." And then he said something no one expected. "If you ever want to see what real courage looks like, come to Burkina Faso. I'll take you to the graves myself." The entire studio went quiet. The lights dimmed. Hannity whispered, "I'll come." For once he meant it. And the camera zoomed out. Not just on a man, not just on a set, but on a moment that united enemies, exposed truth, and cracked open the conscience of the world. Weeks later, Captain Traoré stood barefoot on the red soil of Burkina Faso, surrounded by mothers, children, and journalists. The FBI file had gone viral. Global protests had erupted. Mining permits were suspended. An international investigation had begun. And there, beside a freshly cleaned gravestone marked Malik, age 12, stood Sean Hannity, holding flowers. He wept openly. "I didn't believe you," he said. "But now I do." Traoré nodded. "Not in triumph, but in peace." "We don't want revenge," he said. "We want healing." Then he turned to the cameras one last time, and with the wind brushing his uniform, He spoke in words the world would never forget. Let this grave be the last built for profit. Let this child be the last buried without a name. And let this be the first day we choose people over power. The world watched and wept. If this story touched your heart, if you cried for the children, if you believe the truth matters more than power, please do 3 simple things. Like this video to show the world you stand for justice. Comment the word, "I see you, Africa," so we never forget their names. Subscribe to this channel because more untold stories deserve to be heard. Together, we can give the voiceless a voice and maybe, just maybe, change the world.